to this Sky Sports box office main event from what's becoming something of a spiritual home for British boxing here at the O2 Arena in London. And tonight, as I'm sure I don't need to remind you, Anthony Joshua will be defending his world title and, dare I say, claimed the number one spot in the heavyweight division. He won't be defending it against Tyson Fury, no. The Furies didn't seem too interested in that one, Jim, once Eddie Hearn made contact. Joseph Parker, his team didn't want it. Took one look at Anthony Joshua, I imagine, and some of his recent performances and thought, no thanks, I think we'll bide our time in the other side of the world. Deontay Wilder, no luck there. He's content to simply take on a string of second-rate contenders, Jim. There's nothing of the sort for Anthony Joshua. Take on a dangerous puncher in former Dillian White opponent Dave Allen. And Dave Allen is hungry, he is motivated, and he is gunning for the upset, Jim.
I got some intro going. It's cool.
Don't worry about it, Paul. Just talk over the fucking intro like a cunt. Okay, everyone, welcome to the Next Big Pod, episode 37 and a half. Of course, that was a parody for the intro there. Of course, Eddie Hearn would never make a main event as shit as Joshua versus Allen. He definitely wouldn't take the piss and put it on pay-per-view. But instead, we get Joshua versus Molina, which has been confirmed for December 10th. So we thought we'd have a quick little pod ripping into that a bit. And we're delighted to finally be joined by Paul David Webb, a.k.a. Freelance Fox's assistant, a.k.a. Andrew McCart's lover, I suppose. Paul, you've been kicked off the asylum, very sadly, so we've decided to take you in after you begged for weeks. And we know you're a big AJ fan. What are your initial thoughts on this one? Were you expecting it? Did you think it would be Price? Are you shocked or disappointed in any way?
Well, thanks for that fact-free intro of myself there. Yes, am I shocked? No, I think that it was only going to be a two-horse race. And I think that Hearn was testing the waters a little bit with Price. I think he does that, he's admitted to doing that in the past. And I think the reaction was so bad that it wasn't something he could really even slightly justify. There are ways that you can get around explaining why he picked Molina and why it's not a terrible fight for Joshua. So out of those two options, they all know that Pulev wanted supposedly too much money, the Klitschko situation that was a complete farce in the end. So it really came down to, months ago when the name was first mentioned, I was quite keen for that matchup, before the Vlad option was there. And before Ortiz was signed by Matchroom, I was okay with it. There's too many people banging on about the Arreola fight, which happened years ago. His recent form has been a lot better. I know he still got beat by Deontay Wilder, but he was in that fight. And a lot of people that don't really rate Joshua, this guy's still gone rounds with someone who a lot of people rate higher in Wilder. The Eddie Hearn comparison will be, well, Wilder stopped him in, was it 7 rounds or 8 rounds? And if Joshua does it earlier than that, then that's how they like to always spin things on Sky. I think Joshua will beat him. I think he stops him. I don't think it's a 1-round job, though. I think it will take him a few rounds to get Molina out of there. It's not the worst fight in the world, but once again, it's not the fight that anyone wanted. And when you've got someone like Ortiz, who is ready and available and will be fighting on the undercard, it doesn't make... Well, I say it doesn't make any sense. It makes sense to us because we know. But if you were a general fan, you wouldn't really understand why they were going that route when they had that so glaringly obvious.
Paul, sorry. Ortiz is on the undercard for this show?
Yes.
Not Monte Carlo?
No, he's on both.
Aren't they like 2 weeks apart?
I saw on the press release, he's on this.
No, sorry, I'm not doubting you. I haven't seen the
yeah, I'm sure. I'll double check it, but I'm sure because I read
he is definitely on the card, but he's not an opponent named yet, just in case anything goes wrong in the Malik Scott fight, I guess.
So he's fighting twice in like a month then?
Yeah, because I read there was a paragraph basically it's him and Katie Taylor that they talked about in the same bit on the press release. So yeah, so he's fighting. I think that was always going to be the plan anyway. Because let's be honest, people talking about the Malik Scott fight going rounds, he'll knock Malik Scott out in any round he wants to. So he won't obviously be with anyone particularly good in December. If it was, if I was Hearn, which I'm not, I'd have pulled the Malik Scott fight and put Ortiz straight in with Joshua in December. But
would you have actually though? Because Ortiz would he's absolutely ruined Joshua, and we know you.
But well, I know, but then again, well, that's what some people think. But if you can't deliver a Klitschko type fight, then why not deliver a fight? Because this fight will, as much as I've been saying they can put Josh in with anyone and it will sell well, this fight will do worse than the last two.
It will do a lot worse than Price would have done.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, it would be worse than Price, and it would do worse than the last two. So if pay-per-view buys, getting the most amount of pay-per-view buys isn't what they're looking to do here, then why not putting him in with an interesting fight? A lot of people.
Why didn't he make Price though?
Well, that's what I meant. So if there was pay-per-view buys, was more interest, but I just think it's harder to just pay-per-view buys are one thing. You could get, if they put on, you can name any two completely random people that are popular and put them in a fight, it would sell well on pay-per-view. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's
Andy Patterson.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It doesn't necessarily mean that you can justify it. There are ways and means of doing it. But with this card, it's dead easy. They just do this. They say, right, you've got a world title fight, Cowley fight, another cheap world title fight, Scott Quigg fighting some bum, Callum Smith on because everyone likes Callum Smith, who's a casual. Joshua will, in a main event, that will sell out the arena, and it will do okay pay-per-view buys, but it will do less than Brazil, and it will do certainly less than Charles Martin in the Dillian White fight.
Here's a question. I'm assuming, sorry to the listeners, because I haven't. All I've seen is that the main event was announced. So we're getting an echo. Paul, is it you, mate? I don't know. Someone.
Yeah, hold on, mate.
It's you, Shep.
Is it?
Yeah.
Well, it's not echoing now. Is anyone else getting any? I think it might have been Paul, but yeah, I haven't seen the press release or anything. I just saw the main event was announced. So apologies if I'm repeating what you already know. But I'm assuming Callum Smith is fighting TBA.
No, he's fighting Black. So the undercard is off memory. Callum Smith, Luke Blackledge, Katie Taylor is fighting some lesbian bum, and then you've got Dillian White, Derek Chisora as chief support. Scott Quigg versus
that's chief support.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Scott Quigg versus TBA, and then Burton Buglioni.
Okay, so it's one of those. It'll be a long night, won't it? Yeah,
so it will be. Yeah, it's a long card.
In a sec. I've just had a theory. Do we reckon Callum Smith could beat David Price? And I'm not even joking when I say that.
Probably.
If Callum Smith fought David Price, at whatever weight Price came in at, do you reckon there's a chance Smith could get to his chin and knock him out?
No. Didn't you see Callum Smith against that little fucking kebab shop owner who were about 5'7" and he took him 8 rounds?
What, the Argentinian guy?
Yeah, Callum Smith's a fucking absolute hype job. He hasn't beat anyone.
The only
reason he beats people is because they're shit and they walk forward with their chins in the air, literally in the air, while he throws wild hooks. He's fucking awful.
Blackledge is pretty shite as well, to be fair.
Rocky did Blackledge in a round, didn't he? Rocky Fielding did Blackledge in a round. Callum Smith had the big step up to Rocky Fielding, and now back to Blackledge.
This is categorical proof that Smith is going backwards in terms of his opponent. Yeah.
It doesn't bode well when Luke Blackledge is getting knocked down by Elvis Dubé, the journeyman who's won about 5 fights from 60 or 70.
That was a heavy knockdown, wasn't it, the other week?
Yeah.
Dewey, mate, what are your thoughts? Did you expect Molina? Because we obviously on the pod discussed Price a few weeks back and said we had a horrible feeling that it could be Price. I don't think anyone really picked Molina until the last week or so.
Yeah, well, it's all guesswork, isn't it? Because we're led to believe one thing, then we're led to believe something else. What I will say is, while Sky and Eddie Hearn and Matchroom obviously deserve some criticism for making this fight, for me, ultimately, it stops with Anthony Joshua, because he's probably the only British boxer for a very, very long time who categorically 100% picks his opponents. That's obviously because he makes a lot of money. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to pick his opponents. And if Anthony Joshua wanted to fight someone else, he would. Can you imagine someone telling Anthony Joshua no? They'd be cut off from the money pipeline, wouldn't they? So I think it stops with Anthony Joshua. It's an awful opponent. When the barometer for saying, fair play, it's Eric Molina, he's better than David Price. When you're talking about that for a world heavyweight title, it's not good enough. I will say, traditionally, Anthony Joshua fans are quick to criticise other British world champions from other promotional stables who fight challengers who are useless. And, we've got to appreciate that everyone in boxing is willing to make easy money at the expense of the fans. And the sad thing about it is that the arena will be full. It might not do as many pay-per-view buys as if it was David Price, just because it's the all-English angle. But it'll still do a hell of a lot of pay-per-view buys. It'll still make millions of pounds. And the fans who go there, and I know we use the term casual, but they're not casual Anthony Joshua fans. They're full-on Anthony Joshua fans. They just have no interest or no care for the sport, which is really concerning.
Yeah, they're not boxing fans, Dewey. They're Anthony Joshua fans. They haven't even got a passing interest in the sport. They literally are anti-Joshua fans. They got his Snapchat, all that sort of bollocks in it. They're fans.
Remember the useless guy who David Price fought at the start of October, a month ago today, actually.
Perkovic.
Yeah, if Anthony Joshua fought him, it'd still do 10,000 tickets. This is like the level of hype that we're dealing with. And a lot of people, when we have such a mainstream star like Anthony Joshua, everyone in boxing is like their first automatic reaction is to say, "Oh, fair play, he's growing the sport." Joshua's not growing the sport in a positive way. It's distorting British boxing. This is why, when we have pay-per-view fights like Carl Froch and Kessler, don't mind that at all. We're paying to watch two elite super middleweights go for it. This is distorting it so much, and I don't know what the way back is, because like, probably a couple of years ago, Crawler against Linares would have been pay-per-view. That's a world title unification involving a Brit. We don't have a lot of them. But now, if you're Crawler Linares, you won't get a look in for pay-per-view. Say if, think of our other high-profile world champions. If Tony Bellew fought any other cruiserweight world champion, it wouldn't be pay-per-view. And it probably, in boxing terms, it deserves to be.
Yeah, we'll miss out on quality matchups with guys who are sort of, I guess, B+ level in terms of star power, because we're getting an A-level star against a D level opponent, and it's awful. I agree. I think Carby made a really good point. Just sorry, Paul, I'll get you in a sec. But Sam, you made a really good point a minute ago. They're Joshua fans, not boxing fans, and this is something that we all said for years, especially in the UK, about some of Mayweather's fans in the States, where they were fans of him but not of the sport. They didn't care about the sport's health in 5 years or in 10 years or even in a couple of years. They cared about Mayweather getting to 49-0 or to 50-0, or Mayweather getting, and we had it before with some of the Filipinos with Pacquiao, where they didn't give a shit. Luckily, Pacquiao was the guy who fought everyone, as we said last night on the main show. But it was a situation where they didn't give a shit about the sport in general, as long as their man won. And people like fans like that, they won't care if Eric Molina is winning every round and then it's a horrendous British stoppage. They won't give a shit. They won't give a shit if he gets a rematch. They won't give a shit if it's Joshua punches him after the bell and knocks him out. They won't give a shit if he hits him on the break, because all they care about is a Joshua KO. And
if that shit happens, it'll be on a lad Bible and they'll be like, Joshua is fire and all that fucking lad banter shit.
Joshua don't give a...
all that shit. Like, they love all that stuff.
Well, I will say, we probably haven't had a more loyal fan base in boxing since Hatton. I know that sounds ridiculous, but I honestly think it's true. But at least when Hatton got to world level, he had a succession of really good fights. He obviously beat Costazu. Wasn't long afterwards he unified with Carlos Mauser. And then obviously he wanted to fight. He fought
even his fucking WBU reign of terror wasn't as bad as what Joshua's doing now.
I think Hatton's a good one to bring up, because he was a guy who, but let's say after Hatton beat Zhu, he could have spent the next 5 years selling out the MEN, fighting utter shite, and defending shitty mandatories, or fighting guys who are like ranked 14th or 15th, like Joshua's doing. But Hatton said, I want to go to America, I want to fight the best guys, and I want to prove myself. And yeah, he lost a couple. Yeah, he got a couple of dodgy decisions, against Collazo and all the rest of it. But the fact is, he wanted to go out and have the biggest possible fights. And look, if Joshua said, right, I'm going to Vegas and I'm fighting Deontay Wilder in Vegas, I don't know how many fans he could take over with him, but it would be a few thousand at least, wouldn't it? And I wouldn't be one of those people who's sitting here saying, oh, I want to see him fight in London. Like, I don't care. I just want to see the good fights. Like, I'm happy to stay up till 2 a.m. if it means a unification, or if it means, a meaningful fight. I don't get this. I think it's quite a weird sort of British thing where we put the fact that Joshua's fighting in the UK, that kind of gives him a license to get away with stuff that if he was fighting on the road against bums, you know, the amount of shit I saw James DeGale get because he fought Butte and Medina. And you think if he was fighting them on matchroom shows in the UK, he wouldn't have got anywhere near as much shit. It's because it was kind of out of sight, out of mind. And people, you know, I saw people criticizing him saying, oh, he's going on the road fighting these bums and he's avoiding guys like Groves and Callum Smith. And it was, you know, it's just this parochial nonsense that you get in this country. And I think Joshua is really the embodiment of that. Cal, you haven't had your say yet, mate. Do you think Joshua should just fuck off home, yeah?
Yeah. To be honest, the fight itself, just take everything away, it is a step up, in my opinion. I think this would be the best guy he's fought, which is embarrassing at this stage to say that he's probably the biggest name in fucking England.
Does Molina beat Dillian White?
Yeah. Dillian White's fucking awful. I got on the hype train for like a week and then I saw him again. I saw him, like, he was obviously ridiculously fired up for the fucking AJ fight, and that was the fight of his life. That'll be the best fight of his career. And I just think without that fire in him, he's terrible, he's slow, he's fat, he can't fight for 12 rounds properly. He's the worst. But anyway, the fight, I think, is the best guy he's fought so far. But Hearn's done it to himself like he does all the fucking time. He tells us we're getting Klitschko, and he literally said 90%. So we're getting Klitschko. So that gets everyone, including us and the casuals and everyone else, saying, oh, lovely. That'll be a good fight. That's impressive. Well done, Hearn. And we were all thinking, we'll have to give him some credit for this because that's good. Like, stepping up this early, it's a big fight. It's 50-50. To go from that to Molina is literally a joke and still charge for it. It's like ordering a fucking steak and just getting a salad. And you're like, well, what, I've still got to pay for the steak? Fuck off.
Yeah, at the end of the day, none of us would give a shit if they said, we know Molina's not the best of opponents and we'll tell you it is a tick-over fight because that's what it is. We'll do it on normal Sky. Because from the gate alone, they can fucking pay Molina's purse and they'd still make money. Why does it need to be on pay-per-view? There's no need for it.
Molina,
this
exactly.
obsession.
Molina is getting so he'll be getting what, 50 grand for this?
Hold on, Shep. I don't understand what constitutes a pay-per-view fighter. No fighter is pay-per-view. Fights are pay-per-view. And I don't even agree with that personally, but it's the nature of the sport, isn't it? If people need to be paid so much, they need pay-per-view to make it, then fair enough. But there's no fucking way on this planet that Molina is demanding a purse big enough to constitute it be a pay-per-view.
That's what winds people up, people like us up, is that it's pure greed on Joshua's side, because what fee can
and it is Femi's greed.
You know, Eric Molina can't. What can he demand? He's lucky to be getting a title shot. All he's done is beat 49-year-old Adamek.
His best win is a loss. He's another one. He's another fucking matchroom opponent whose best win is a loss. It happens all the time with him. They go, well, he lost to him, but he's only lost to him.
His best win, and let's just to put this in context for people who might not have seen the fight itself, was what, 18 months ago against Deontay Wilder. Wilder's first defense at home back in Alabama. I think his first fight in Alabama in several years. Classic. And look, I don't want to take credit away from Molina because he did give him a good few rounds and he did wobble him badly and then got knocked out. But this was a case of Wilder had just won the title in a bit of an upset and was having a fight back in his home state for the first time. And if there's ever a fight when you're going to take your eye off the ball and maybe underperform a bit, it's that sort of situation, isn't it? And I think Molina sort of he ran into a bad version of Wilder that night, and he still got knocked out. So I agree with you. It's while you don't want to sort of shit on a guy for giving a good performance, at the same time, you can't dine out on a loss, or there's only so much you can. Sorry, go on.
Can you remember?
It wasn't that different. Go on, Carl. Sorry.
Can you remember the fight? Like, because I remember watching it, and I can remember Molina must have been down 4 times. Like, it's not like Wilder just caught him late on and like come from behind win. Like,
I think it was, from what I remember, Cal, it was a bit like the White fight for age, where Molina was hurt early, then he came back and hurt Wilder, and then he got knocked down like 3 or 4 times and got knocked out. Yeah, he
still gave it a good go though. That's what I mean.
But it doesn't.
What I'm saying is it wasn't like a complete wipe. Wilder's had other fights where it was a complete wipe at every round. He was live in the fight, and Cal's point
tried to win.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. Cal's. I know it's tragic that we're talking about that as being a positive, but he won't be coming over here to get knocked out. he may end up being knocked out, but he will actually be thinking, I could win this. And when you talk,
but again, I've said this a few weeks back. That shouldn't constitute.
No, I know.
Shep was giving someone credit because they tried to win.
Yeah,
it's a fucking sport.
Yeah.
If you're not trying to win, what is the fucking point?
Yeah.
No, I agree. And Cal's point about the money one was interesting as well, because you have to bear in mind that Hearn's created this atmosphere where he talks about the huge numbers. He talks about the massive money that Joshua's doing. So is it a surprise when someone like Pulev, who doesn't really need to take that fight, demands £1 million or 800,000 euros, whatever the figure was that was quoted, because they know how much that Joshua's getting. If Joshua's making millions of pounds, then if you're the opponent, why should you take the fight for 50 grand or 100 grand? You know, Molina will be earning good money for this. It won't be amazing money, but it'll be a damn sight more than he got paid for Adamek, and it'll be a lot more than he got paid for fighting Wilder, because they know to get any sort of opponent who isn't just a complete mercenary or isn't someone daft like Shannon Briggs, they're going to have to pay mega money for it. And it is shit, because like I said, the whole point of being a pay-per-view fight is a pay-per-view fight is one that it's the same description that's been for since the dawn of time with pay-per-view. It's a fight that can't be made without pay-per-view money. That's the only real reason you can ever justify. And even that's not really justification. But this fight could be made non-pay-per-view. And what they're doing is, the reason why it has to be pay-per-view is because they're going to pay the likes of Scott Quigg and they're going to pay Callum Smith and various others decent money. And yet, once you use that as an excuse, you wouldn't be able to do it. But for me, you could do the Joshua fight, stick Burton Buglioni on it, and one other out of the net, stick Ortiz or Katie Taylor, and make it a Sky show. I'll be happy with that. No problem with that at all. Get rid of the Calify fight, put it somewhere else. Get rid of Chisora White, put it on that rubbish November card in London, which is absolutely appalling. You know, that screams out for a headline fight like Chisora White. I know why they've done it, because here's what will happen. No one will be interested in this main event. The main event won't sell pay-per-views. What you'll get is Chisora and White acting like a pair of like East End yardies and having a go at each other at press conferences, flip over tables, IFL will wank themselves silly. And that's what they'll be used to sell this show, because they know that the main event has minimal interest outside of the fact that Joshua's in the home corner.
And then Shannon Briggs will come to the ring afterwards and challenge AJ, and then that will be the next pay-per-view. Guys, just as a quick segue before we go on to the undercard, I found a quote from Big Pricey this afternoon since the fight was announced. Price apparently told ESPN, yeah, Dewey, I'll let you hop in a sec, mate. But David Price apparently told ESPN this afternoon, they've taken the safer option without a doubt. I always thought that Joshua's team think Molina is a safer bet. It's less likely something will go wrong. My selling point is the excitement I bring. But Joshua's people began to realize there was a serious chance of him getting knocked out if he fought me. There's not going to be many champions picking me out as a voluntary defense. And I think it's boiled down to Joshua's trainer, and I can't blame him. So just to be clear there, that's Price, who refuses to fight anyone in the top 50 to actually get into the rankings, claiming that people aren't picking him out as a voluntary. So yeah, that kind of encapsulates.
Shep,
some of
I've seen a few people on Twitter, Walks and Ainsley is the few, who said that McCracken wasn't overly keen on the Price fight and preferred Molina because they do see him as less risky.
Well, I don't think there's anyone less risky. More less risky than Price in the division, because every other Molina will actually throw a punch. Price won't. So by definition, you know, we could have what was it? Tom, I can't remember if Tom said it on the air a few months ago. But when Tom said he genuinely fancy himself against Paul Smith in a fight, Tom would actually throw a punch. If you put Tom in with AJ and he was coked up and going mental, he would at least try and throw a punch. Whereas I genuinely don't think Price would. I think Price would completely freeze, and that's why I tweeted earlier. And again, you said this earlier, Carpy, that it's a horribly low standard to set, and you're right, it is. But the standards for Joshua are abysmally low anyway because of what you can get away with. But I said Molina is better than Price purely because he will actually throw a punch and show up to win. I firmly believe Price would mentally break hours before he got into the ring, and he wouldn't throw a punch and he'd shell up. Dewey, mate, I know you want to hop in. Do you want to let loose on this main event?
Yeah. Do you know this argument that Molina qualifies to fight for another world title on the back of every round of a world title shot, actually trying to win a world title rather than spewing it and landing one punch? If that qualifies him for fighting for a world title, then why have they chosen the worst fighter that Deontay Wilder has defended his world title against. Chris Ariola's already knocked him out. I don't care how long ago it was. He knocked him out in the first round. And if you actually watch the fight, Molina quit. That's Wilder's most recent opponent. After that, it was the Polish heavyweight, Arthur Spilka, who I actually thought was winning that fight. And I think Showtime had him up as well. Another one, a lot better than Eric Molina. If you fought Eric Molina, he'd probably win every round. The one before that was the Jonathan Duhaupas, who then went on to beat Robert Helenius away territory as well. I think it was the actual same night Molina beat Adamek. He did better than Molina against Wilder. He was stopped 2 rounds later. So you could argue he's more durable, and he wasn't dropped like 5 times like Molina was. Before Molina, it was Bermane Stiverne, former world champion, tough fighter, never been stopped. So, surely that makes more sense than Molina. The reason why they've chosen Molina, who qualifies for the fight because he's landed 1 punch against Deontay Wilder, is because he's severely cheaper than every opponent I've just named and every opponent Deontay Wilder has fought for a world title. It's a joke. Eric Molina is genuinely one of the worst world title challengers I can think of. I think he's worse than like Tommy Carpenter, who's awful, and he's not far off Farmer, who fought Flanagan in the summer.
Are we all agreed? Do we all agree that do we think Molina is a step down from Brazil?
Shep, your sound's really shit, mate.
Oh, sorry. Can you guys hear me?
No, log on then log back off. You should sort it out.
All the listeners will leave if I go.
We'll try.
Following on, are we still live? Yeah.
Yeah.
We are, but Carby, I can't turn it off without ending the broadcast. So you just have to put up with my shit sound. Sorry. Dewey, go on.
Following on from that point, right? Joshua's fighting Molina because he's cheap, and we've all established that. But we're all quick to criticize Klitschko over the years for being extremely difficult to negotiate with. How many failed negotiations has Anthony Joshua had now? Because they failed to get Derek Chisora in the ring at the start of this year. They've got nowhere with Parker. Despite claiming it's an easy win, they've got, and if it's an easy win, it'd be a good chance to get the mandatory out the way. They've got nowhere near Parker, and he's gone his route with it, is going his route with the WBO. They failed to get Pulev in the ring, and they failed with Klitschko. So we need to wake up and actually realize that Anthony Joshua might be very difficult to negotiate with, and I'm very sure that they would have been asking for more of the pie than they deserve against Klitschko.
I think, I agree with that, Dewey. And sorry, assuming you guys can hear me, I think Paul made the point earlier that because Hearn talks about money so much in his public interviews and in his videos and all the rest of it, he'll talk about, Joshua's just made 7 million quid against Dillian Whyte. And then obviously, the other fighters aren't stupid, but it's almost as if he expects to be able to publicly sort of drive down the road in a brand new Ferrari, and yet sort of never give anyone a ride and never give anyone a sort of a hand up. Do you know what I mean? And when he enters the negotiating table, it's almost as if he says, well, actually, we've only got 50 grand to pay you, sorry. And it's like, yeah, but weren't you just boasting about having made 25 million quid in the last year off Joshua fights? And now you're saying, you can't pay me 6 figures. And then, through his own fault, you end up with guys like David Price probably saying, I want 200 grand. And obviously Price doesn't deserve that. Pulev probably doesn't deserve what he was asking for. But Hearn and Joshua bring it on themselves, don't they? Dewey, can I just ask you, you mentioned earlier that Joshua picks his own opponents. I hadn't heard that before. I presumed that it was more a case of him sort of letting Eddie micromanage it, and Hearn and the Hearns, as it were the ones who were in charge.
I don't think anyone tells Anthony Joshua what to do.
That's very interesting.
I was going to say this earlier on, like the chief of Matchroom, as weird as it sounds, is AJ. AJ decides who's on his undercards. He decides how much people are paid on his undercards, and the whole boxing calendar revolves around what AJ wants to do.
Do you think, lads, right, for a world title, if he's defending his world title, do you think if there was an opponent that he didn't want to fight, that he would have to fight him? Because I'm very sure that will never happen. For the same reason, if Luis Ortiz wants that fight, he's going to have to take 50 pence.
Yeah, I agree with that. If AJ doesn't want to fight someone, he's not going to fight him. And he's not going to be forced into it by anyone.
Yeah, exactly. No, Sky can't force him into a fight. Hearn won't be able to force him into a fight. He picks exactly who he wants to fight.
Imagine if Sky said, no, we don't want to show that fight. And he went, okay, then. I'm sure someone will show it. And he went to BT. They'd fucking bite his hand off to get him on their channel, wouldn't they? Of course they would.
Yeah, and
people would subscribe to BT Sport just for Femi.
Yeah, and again, there's no way that, you know, Showtime or whatever international network he's with, there's no way any of them are going to be dictating, right, you can only come on Showtime if you're going to fight one of these 5. You know, you're not going to get a situation like you've got with HBO where they're saying, right, to Pacquiao, you know, you can only come on our network if you're going to fight X, Y, or Z. I'd never thought of it like that, Dewey. I always assumed it was a case of Joshua sort of trusting other people to handle it for him. Maybe because of the way he comes across in interviews, and he's quite sort of mild-mannered in his public persona. But yeah, what you're saying makes complete sense. Like, there's no way someone is going to walk into Joshua's sort of office and say, right, don't talk back to me. You are fighting Joseph Parker in New Zealand in 6 months' time, and you don't have a say in the matter. It's never going to happen, is it?
Yeah, and he'll be the only world champion in Britain who can pick exactly his opponent. I'm convinced of it.
I guess it could be a case where eventually, you know, the momentum just dies completely because we keep getting fights like this, and eventually people, you know, the British public are fucking stupid. I've said this many times on many different pods, but eventually they will realise that it's Turkey after Turkey. I mean, even the casuals were getting a bit annoyed with Charles Martin, you know, the way he fought. And they were saying, you know, it's great AJ won the belt, but God, that opponent didn't really try anything, did he? And I guess people, I suppose that the patience is finite, but it could last for a few years, which is a real shame because, yeah, like you say, someone like Ortiz, Joshua will say, yeah, all right, I'll fight you, but, you know, I've got 6 rematch clauses, none of the belts are on the line, and you're going to get paid 25 grand or whatever it is.
Don't you think, though, a big problem here is if Joshua is getting 7 million to beat up Dillian White, who's like a club fighter, and he'll probably be getting 5 million to fight Molina, who's a teacher. Like, why?
Yeah, he's literally a teacher.
He stopped teaching about 2 months ago to take it professional. But,
isn't he a gym teacher, isn't he, or something like that, right?
Yeah, but like my point is, like, why? Like, if I'm him, and I'm like just like anyone else, anyone who is him, unless they're like one of them stupid people who wants to prove they're the best, then you just take these easy 5 million paydays. And if he's got the power over Hearn, then why would he ever take a big? Unless Hearn can say, well, you'll get 20 million for fighting Ortiz, which he can't because no one knows who Ortiz is as much as they know Molina. So, I mean, it's only boxing fans that know who Ortiz is. So he's not going to get any. He might sell 100,000 more if he fights Ortiz, but like. Unless
it's like David Hay, where Hearn is like, okay, we can literally fill Wembley for this fight.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I said in the WhatsApp chat, how great would it be if Eddie went all Don King on Femi, like walked in with Femi, then Ortiz smashed him to bits, and Hearn's in the ring waving his Cuban flag around at the end, leaves with Ortiz.
Yeah. It doesn't seem to me like it'll change unless they get the big Wembley fight against Fury or Hay or Klitschko next year.
Cal, do you remember when Hearn was saying all about the false economy that Heyman created with all his stable?
Yeah, cheers, Eddie.
He's done that with Joshua because, like you say, there's no way Joshua should be getting paid like 7 million for a British title fight. No way.
And he's almost done in a weird way. And again, it's going to sound ridiculous drawing the comparison, but he's almost done a kind of Floyd where he's got his own orbit now. Where do you remember years ago when you had the theory was after Garcia beat Matisse, and then Garcia, you know, famously refused to fight anyone with a pulse for like 2 years, and that was entirely because there was the rumor that he was going to get the Mayweather fight, and he didn't want to lose and fuck it up. The same with Khan. You remember for 3 years or whatever, Khan thought he was getting the Floyd fight for whatever reason, and he was really reluctant to fight anyone in the top sort of 15 in the division because he didn't want to fuck it up and lose. And I think now you're getting. Price will never fight anyone with a pulse again as long as there's that kind of carrot on the stick in the form of AJ. If he thinks, I might get the AJ fight next summer, between now and next summer, he's not going to fight anyone inside the top sort of 100. And it'll be the same for guys like, I mean, even someone like Dillian White, if he thinks there's a chance he's going to get the AJ rematch, there's no incentive for someone like White. And I do actually believe that White is the sort of guy who would fight anyone for the, you know, he seems like a bit of a mad bastard. He probably would, if they said, right, you're getting in with Pulev, I think he'd probably do it.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. That's the one thing about White. That's the one thing about White that I do like, because at the end of the day, although Dave Allen turned out to be worse than we thought he might be, that could have been a potential banana skin. He run beaten, blah, blah, blah. Chisora, if he's got, I don't know, 70% of what at his best, he's a tough fight for White. Like, he's not actually just sitting there. Price won't fight someone like fucking Chisora, no chance.
I think a lot of people are going to be shocked by how shot Chisora is on the pay-per-view, because I think he's completely finished. And he's going to, I think White will win. He'll just outbox him very, very, very easily.
I've seen it described as shot versus shit earlier on, and that is exactly what it is.
Yeah, exactly. In his prime, Chisora would have battered White, because Chisora was a sort of fringe world-level guy in his prime. But his prime was 5 years ago, probably. And it's, you know, it's just a name now, isn't it? It's an empty shell of a name. Can I just say one more thing that annoys me at the minute about people justifying this? They go, oh, well, who can he fight? You can only go off the top 15 rankings. But then in return, you can say, well, why the fuck did Tony Bellew fight BJ Flores? Because he conveniently found himself ranked. It's not the rankings. We all know the rankings are bullshit. If they want to maneuver someone into a top 15, they can. David Hay is ranked in the IBF, is he not? And he's looking for a fight. Why could that not have been made? And Ortiz is top 15, isn't he, as well? Yeah.
I don't understand how people just lap up the bullshit and then to believe all the lies, like, oh, we can only fight who's in the top 15. Everyone knows that's not the case, because everyone just finds himself with a brown envelope and then they get bumped at the rankings, and then you can fight. It's simple as that, isn't it?
Well, that's what we said a couple of months ago, wasn't it? When Price mysteriously appeared at number 12 in the IBF, despite having not fought anyone in the top 500 for 3 years. And he just mysteriously showed up. And, you know, I think Briggs is in there somewhere as well. The IBF is a fucking state at the moment, that top 15.
They've got computerized rankings or something at the IBF, or something weird like that.
It's not good at all. And I don't think that's any coincidence that it's turned to shit since Joshua's become champion. I don't think that's a coincidence at all. And the excuse is nonsense, Carl. And it's an excuse made by people who are looking to further their agenda. And their agenda is that Joshua is the greatest fighter in the world, and the only reason the big fights don't happen is because everyone's scared of him. And that is what they they're like sort of religious fanatics. That's what they desperately want to believe. So they fit everything in to go with that kind of agenda. Sorry, Dewey, do you want to pop in?
Oh, sorry, I was sneezing.
Okay. Guys, just a quick one. Do we think, what about something like Dillian White versus Ortiz next year? Early next year.
Yeah, I think they'll do that fight.
Can you imagine what? Well,
Chisora and White is for a WBC eliminator, not a final. Just one of Hearn's eliminators for an eliminator.
So that'll be for Wilder then.
Yeah.
Strange. Maybe he'd ship White off to America to have him fight Wilder. I guess that kind of makes sense.
Well, again, it can protect Femi from a legit opposition for a little while longer.
Yeah, keep him busy. Although this is the other thing I don't get, is that like why there isn't more talk about Wilder versus Joshua, because I pick Joshua I'd favour him quite heavily in that fight, and that's a big fight because you know Wilder's got a pretty big profile in America now, and you know he speaks good English, he's good on the mic, he shouts, he's kind of quite flashy. If you had them two maybe fighting on the same night, let's say on a Showtime card in the States, you could build that really quickly.
I think that would be pay-per-view in America, that as well. If it was built correctly, like you say, if they were both on a card together.
Yeah, but they never mention it. No one ever mentions that fight, and it's really, I don't know why, because I think Wilder is still a very, very vulnerable champion that, you know, that Joshua, I would favour him quite handily to beat. But maybe that's one for 2 years down the road or something. Sorry, Dewey.
It did surprise me earlier. I saw, I think it was about a minute long, a Showtime promo for the next fight against Molina, and there was no mention of Wilder. And Showtime were quite big on Wilder, but I wonder if that's something they've been told not to link, you know, with their deal with Joshua.
Yeah. It could be that it's a kind of out of sight, out of mind thing, and they're just hoping people forget about Wilder. I don't know, and maybe. Do you know what I could see? I mean, if Hearn's clever, he'll get Ortiz up the WBC rankings, then send Ortiz off to America, destroy Wilder, and then come back with the belt. That's what he'd do if he had a kind of long-term plan. But I don't know if maybe Ortiz won't be prepared to wait that long. I don't know what it is. But guys, should we just go on to the undercard very quickly? We've actually had a really good question in, which sort of feeds into our broader thoughts about the pay-per-view. The question is, Carpy touched on it earlier. What, if anything, warrants a pay-per-view in boxing? So, for example, do we think that something like Mayweather versus Canelo was worthy of pay-per-view? If you remember how good that undercard was and how big the main event was, do we think Hatton Mayweather was worthy of a pay-per-view? You know, do we think something like Froch Groves 2 was worthy of a pay-per-view? Anyone want to jump in on that?
You need two elite fighters to justify pay-per-view, I reckon.
Yeah, you can fuck this thing off like with the cards pay-per-view.
What,
No,
so
the card isn't pay-per-view.
I'm going to be. Let me be devil's advocate here, and I'll interrogate you all on your theories. So Ainsley, you're saying Roman Gonzalez against Juan Francisco Estrada should be pay-per-view because that's two elite fighters.
That's, you half got me there.
No, but it's relative to what they earn at the same time as well, isn't it?
So I mean, like, yeah, that's the thing. So those two guys, you could say if you put that on regular HBO, that'd cover it. So if you went for pay-per-view, it'd just be greed. So like, in theory, it's two elite fighters, but say like,
because I think this feeds into my view of it is slightly different, but I think you're getting there. Is I think there are genuinely some fights that can't be made on regular TV, and pay-per-view is appropriate in some crazy situations.
All right.
So I think Pacquiao Floyd, I had absolutely no problem with paying 20 quid for it because that's impossible to make on regular TV. Without both guys taking a 90% pay cut, which is never going to happen. I have no issue with a fight like that where it's two elite guys and it's impossible to make otherwise. But Dewey said earlier, most important thing here is Joshua could be fighting on regular Sky. Eric Molina is not earning 5 million quid for this fight. So do you guys agree with that, or do we think that pay-per-view is just shite and should be, it's never justified?
A lot of the reason that pay-per-view comes in now, though, is because people have got a fucking overinflated value of their own worth and wanting more money than they actually should be getting, so that they're sort of demanding it. So, like, Triple G Lemieux's an example of that. That shouldn't be in pay-per-view. Crawford Postol.
But actually, you see, I don't agree. I don't think Golovkin Lemieux could have been made without pay-per-view. I don't think it could, because Lemieux wanted 1.5.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. So that is the other factor. So it's sort of people asking for deluded amounts.
But in that sense, it's justified though, because you're getting, if a fight can't be made without it, is what I'm saying.
But I don't think so. Would people? It's all right saying it can't be made without it, but I reckon Paul Smith wouldn't fight Chavez unless he was getting pay-per-view money. So then you can say, oh well, like again, most theories with this have some sort of flaw to it in one way or another. So I think you've sort of got to look at it in a number of ways. There's a lot of grey areas.
Like Coogan.
Yeah.
Carl, you got any thoughts on the grey areas, mate?
There's a lot of them. Great bastard.
To be honest, it's pay-per-view. I'm not so bad about it as some of you. I don't mind it if it is a good fight, like Froch Groves 2. I'm absolutely fine to pay for that. It's a massive fight, blah de blah. But like the bar's got so low now that like people were saying like AJ Pulev is like a definite pay-per-view. It's like what, like a fringe top 10 fucking heavyweight against like the 5th best heavyweights. Why is that pay-per-view?
Okay, here's a question. If
that's the problem, the bar's just so far down. It's like pay-per-view. The whole chat about it's gone, man. Like people are going to accept such shit now.
If Ward Kovalev was taking place in London, would you guys be happy to pay 15 quid to watch that on pay-per-view?
Yeah.
Same. I'd be totally fine with paying for that. Obviously, I'm not going to pay for it because it's on Box Nation, I think. No, actually, it's on Sky.
It's on Sky, yeah.
But that's the thing. That's on regular Sky, and then AJ against the school teachers on fucking pay-per-view. But like,
which shows you how broken the system Yeah.
I've missed all of obviously the initial ranting, but I mean, you might have said it or not. But like, if they had to make this fight and they had no other options, you don't put the belt on the line. You don't put it on pay-per-view. You just say, well, we couldn't get anything, and that's what you do.
And what's really weird is that used to happen. Oscar De La Hoya used to fight on regular HBO a couple of times a year because he'd be fighting guys like Steve Forbes and kind of shitty mandatories where
was his Felix Sturm fight regular HBO?
Yeah, I think so. That was the night, and Hopkins was regular HBO as well that same night. Do you remember? I think Hopkins, can't remember who Hopkins fought, but might have fought Joppy. I can't remember. But anyway,
Joppy was before.
No, that was Trinidad. That was Trinidad when Trinidad fought.
Yeah.
Whoever it was, Hopkins fought someone that same night as De La Hoya fought Sturm, and then they both sort of interviewed, at the same time afterwards, and then it fed into the pay-per-view of Hopkins De La Hoya that autumn or whatever, whenever it was. But yeah, De La Hoya used to fight on. He was a pay-per-view fighter from the age of like 21, right? But he used to fight on regular HBO. He probably fought a dozen times on regular HBO because he was fighting against opponents where they just couldn't possibly justify it. Roy Jones as well. Roy Jones used to fight on regular HBO all the time, and he'd hop on to pay-per-view for a big fight, then he'd hop back. But they don't do it anymore. They seem to think that it's a bit like the Smiths theory about world level. You fight at world level, doesn't matter how badly you lose or what happens, you are then world level forever.
But sorry, Scott. So like this year, if you look at the British pay-per-views, you could say, I'd say like Quig Frampton, you can justify it just about. But like, you can't justify any of these AJ ones. Some people are justifying the Charles Martin one, saying, oh, Hearn had to pay all this money out. But the thing is, Hearn made out like he took a risk getting Charles Martin over here, but he just completely offset the entire risk by putting it on pay-per-view and charging everyone else. So he's not took any risk. That's not like what they used to do fucking 20 years ago. Promoters would put up their own money, and if the fighter fucking lost, they fought it. All Hearn does now is shift the liability onto the fans. So he's got no risk involved at any time. So if AJ had lost to Charles Martin, Hearn wouldn't have been out of pocket because he'd sold all them pay-per-views and he'd put the tickets at a stupid amount. All the pay-per-view is just used to fucking offset the liability.
I've got an idea for a fun feature that will cheer all of us up. Right, nobody wants to hear it.
Fire away.
Right. A ringside ticket to Anthony Joshua against Eric Molina is £800. What else would you do with your £800?
800's a lot, isn't it?
There's a lot of things I'd do for that. What's 800 times 6? I'd buy 5,400 eggs, go to Matchroom HQ, and fucking sell the building.
You could probably buy about 70 Anthony Joshua snapbacks for that money.
Lads, I've just noticed something quite interesting. Looking at the poster for the fight, at the bottom, you've got all the usual, sponsor logos. You've got Sky Sports, Matchroom, all the rest of it. And then you've just got that little Anthony Joshua logo, which I think tells you everything you need to know about how
that's been there.
Joshua's the brand, isn't he?
That was there. That's been there for a little bit now, but it adds credence to some of the thoughts that AJ has just tried.
It's really interesting because that's almost as if you're putting a stamp on it to say like this is an official AJ fight. Do you know what I mean? That's really weird. You don't see that because it's not AJ Promotions, is it? He doesn't have his own promotional.
No, it's literally just his like logo.
His logo. Really, that's really odd. You really don't see that very often. Okay, here's a question, guys. Just to sort of keep it rolling. Do we think can we see Joshua going solo? Would you be surprised? Would you be surprised if, let's say, in 2 years he was still with Matchroom?
I don't think he'll be there this time next year.
It must be. Whenever his contract runs out, it's going to be very difficult to renew, isn't it?
Do you have any idea when that is?
No, I don't. Well,
3 more fights, Hearn said.
Yeah, but what I would be surprised with is when he become world champion, then if Hearn's smart, which we all know he is, I'm sure there'll be some sort of clause that would extend the contract for him.
But I'd imagine that Joshua has probably got enough clout to buy himself out at any contract now.
Someone's just said something quite interesting in the chat, basically saying if this was the 80s or the 90s and they were trying to put a pay-per-view together, it would literally be Joshua versus Hay and then Brooke versus Khan on the undercard. That's genuinely what they would have done 20 years ago. That's the sort of cards used to be built. If you look at Don King's cards from the sort of early 90s, and just imagine if they did that now, you would genuinely get people tweeting Hearn saying, you could have done 2 pay-per-view shows. What are you playing at? Do you remember that one where that guy was complaining that it was too cheap and he wanted to pay more for it? Do you remember that? They were saying only 15 quid for Joshua versus White. And the guy was saying, like, you should have charged 30, Eddie. And he was genuinely, and I think I retweeted him at the time. I think Brian was going mad about it because we were saying, this is like a psychologist would have a field day here. This is a guy genuinely angry that he's underpaying, that he's getting a good deal. Like, he wants to be paying more. It's extraordinary. You do not see that in any other sport. I'm convinced of it.
But, like, I've seen one tweet. I don't know why I've got him blocked, but there's justification. Ben Dares from BBC. And he said, like, he's got sympathy for Joshua because Klitschko can't do it. And he said it's too early for Hay. But we've said this before. If you hold a world title, no fight is too early for you. Once you hold that belt, you can't then be saying, oh, I need a warm-up fight for this, I need a warm-up fight for that.
You can't have held the belt for a year and then be saying it's too early.
You can't have had it as soon as you fight for that. So the second Charles Martin had fucking cleaned his arse and he had that belt in his hands, at that point then, he couldn't turn around and say he's not ready for anyone or it's too early. Once you hold the world title, that's it. You have got to be open to fight everyone.
Having your cake and eating it, isn't it?
Yeah.
The idea that there was a brilliant tweet about. Sorry, Dewey. I know you were going to say something. I'll let you hop in a sec. There was a fantastic tweet. You guys, if you don't follow him, you should on Twitter. A guy called Eric Raskin, who does the HBO pod. He tweeted about a year ago, complaining about this exact same phenomena when Wilder was the champion, and he just spent a year fighting 3, relatively sort of C, D level opponents. And Raskin said, the fact that Wilder can get away with fighting these guys and the fact that he can essentially become a prospect and a world champion at the same time is proof that there are too many belts, because the whole point of a championship belt is that it should prevent this situation from ever happening.
Yeah, but it's not even like Wilder beat a cabbage like Charles Martin to get the belt. He beat a legit heavyweight.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Steve Earn threw that fight. Everyone knows.
Maybe he did, but still, he beat someone who was ranked as a decent heavyweight, not a bum-wearing grills who proclaimed himself.
But it's like
a god. Showed up to win, mate. He showed up 100% to win that night. He was completely prepared physically and mentally to win, right?
Yeah.
I'm quite proud to say I've still never watched the Martin Joshua fight. I've only watched the final round where he gets knocked down.
Yeah, I didn't.
I saw the KO and I thought I never.
Only 2 rounds.
But I watched the KO and that was it. And because I was on holiday at the time and I thought I'm not watching that fight. I'm not wasting 8 minutes or whatever it is. Honestly,
I was raging when he beat him.
Dewey, sorry, you wanted to jump in, mate.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. The point I was going to make is, obviously, it's been said morally, Joshua can't be fighting people and saying I'm learning on the job when he's a world champion. But that is the way they've matched him. That is exactly what they've done. They've put in him with Brazil, who had an inflated record, not very good, and they could picture as a 50-50 fight, which everyone should have on their way towards a world title. And then they've put him in with someone, or they're going to put him in with someone who's fought for a world title. So if he wasn't a world, or didn't have a belt, then you could pass it off. But they're having fights now that they should be having without a belt on his way to a world title.
Yeah, you're spot on.
Do we totally agree? And I just want to say a shout out to our good mate Adam Smith, aka Smido, who I definitely didn't call a mutant last night. That was a sound glitch on the pod. But he basically just said what we were saying earlier. It's remarkable that Wilder hasn't been mentioned at all during these build-ups, when it's already been proven that he was willing to travel and defend his belt on the road because he was
injured,
in Russia.
Yeah, but he's injured.
But I don't care. Fight him in February.
Yeah, but I think that he's sort of fucked because when he does come back, I think he's got to fight Povetkin or Stiverne. I don't think he's got an option now.
When we talked last night about fights that haven't happened, and 2016 being such a bad year, it's such a bad thing that Wilder didn't end up fighting Povetkin. What a mess that was.
Me and Ainsley are big on the Wilder train as well.
Yeah, I've been for ages, but honestly, I think if Wilder fought AJ, it would be hilarious because it just all come crumbling down very, very quickly. Wilder beat Joshua every day at week and twice on a Sunday. As bad as everyone thinks he is, he's fucking smashing.
You see, I think Joshua would beat Wilder, so I think that fight would be really good because I think it would split opinion.
Yeah, I agree. That's what I was just trying to say. Joshua is a lot better technically than Wilder, but Wilder, we talk about, David Price has got that one big punch when he's literally 1 in a million chance. Wilder's got better power and he'll let his hands go. He's definitely got that.
You know what it is?
That Wilder power is freakish as well. What he did to Stiltzker was disgusting.
But
people call it an equaliser. It's not. That's a fucking match winner. That wouldn't get you 1-1. That put you 2-1 in front in the 93rd minute.
But it's not just that he's got the power. He throws shots in weird ways, so you can't really You've got to get someone to spar against who's a bit of a fucking idiot and just throws half windmill type punches and just fucking telegraphs every single shot. You think you can see it coming and you still get chinned by it. But I forgot who it was. I think it was some American was saying that he sparred with Price and he sparred with Wilder. And he's like, yeah, Wilder definitely hits harder than him. And you don't see Wilder shots come as much. But I think Wilder would handle him pretty quickly. But there we go. I think Povetkin had chin AJ, to be fair.
Povetkin is literally half Joshua's size, honestly. That's a good fight. That's a good fight because Povetkin is more skilled in pretty much every way, but he's so much smaller. He would be absolutely dwarfed by Joshua.
I think
it's a great fight for next year if they can make it.
Yeah, but we'll see. If he gets the interim, if he beats Stiverne, well, he probably will, and Wilder's still injured, they might just throw it together, but he's going to have to travel if you fight Povetkin. He's not travelling anywhere.
No, he won't. And he's, he can, like Dewey said, I'm sure he can use his financial clout to get out of any awkward mandatories or any awkward unifications that might be coming up in the next few years. Guys, sorry, go on.
My last rant on AJ, his mandatory was supposed to be ordered in this month, in November. We all know it's not going to be ordered. And Parker's messed it up by going the WBO route, whatever. It's obviously an easier fight, that's his prerogative. But they've suggested, and we've been here a couple of weeks ago, they suggested the deal was 90% done. But they've now suggested that the Klitschko fight is done for the spring in March. Well, Klitschko doesn't have a belt, so usually unification supersedes mandatories. But if a mandatory is ordered in the new year, then the Klitschko fight's not going to happen anyway.
Well, they'll just pay some step-aside money, won't they? That's all that'll happen.
Well, they won't, because the mandatory, the way it'll go now, there's Pulev there, who has already priced himself out of the fight. Parker's not there. I think they got one space vacant, and then the next person is David Hay.
But David Hay,
he'll be entitled to 15%, because if you're not ranked in the top 2 with the IBF and it goes to purse bids, all you're entitled to is 15%. But I'm sure Hay will threaten that he's got some big financial backing, and they'll make a deal before it goes to purse bids.
It's not, because Hay's mandatory for Parker Ruiz.
All right, then. So we go even lower than.
He'll get pulled for that, and then you pretty much get into do Happer's fucking area. But he's fighting Takam, is he not?
I'll tell you now. The ratings as of September with the IBF, they got Joseph Parker, we know won't happen. Kubrat Pulev, we know won't happen. David Hay, for reasons you've just said, won't happen. Then you're right, it goes to Doof Haffers.
It'd be Takam, wouldn't it?
God alive, get this.
Oh, yeah, it is.
Doof Haffers, Ruiz, Takam. So if if it's none of them, it'll be Glasgow. Fucking hell.
Glasgow's still injured. So
Has
then,
he
So then
fought?
it's Molina again.
so yeah, so you know what? What's the fucking betting that between now and then they call this as a mandatory? They say, well, this will count as a mandatory defence. I fucking bet you that happens.
This top 15 is horrendous.
Oh, look at who's number 10. Here we go. So Chisora's number 10. So whoever wins out of Chisora and White will probably end up getting put above Molina. So it's going to be them.
It'll be White. Dillian White rematch will be the mandatory. I'm calling it now.
Yeah, it is, because if Chisora's 10 and Molina's 8, so Molina's going to get beat, and you'd assume if Chisora won, he'd go higher. So if White beats him, he's probably going to take both of them. So White's going to end up like between 6th and 8th.
Yeah, they'll do White in the new year.
And then what they'll probably do is say, all right, then, well, White versus Duhapis or Takam for mandatory, and they'll just end up making some dodgy deal. That's what's going to happen, isn't it?
Yeah, it'll be a backhander, I think. Does anyone have any thoughts on just before we wrap up, on the rest of the undercard? Obviously, we've talked about White against Chisora, but any thoughts on Yafai or on what's the other one they're doing?
Yafai's a bomb.
Chep, the other fight I really like on the undercard.
Sorry, yeah, go on.
The other fight I really like is Buglioni and Burton. Buglioni actually beat Burton twice in the amateurs, and I'll be interested to see the odds on that. I think they'll make him an underdog, but I fancy him to do it.
I think Buglioni will get
Buglioni
stopped.
beats him. Okay, because Burton will be quite a big favourite, won't he, on the odds?
Yeah, do you know, I usually like an upset, but I can appreciate they're probably not going to happen. But I think Buglioni is quite solid. I think he'll be stronger at light heavyweight. And if you look at, like, Mal Shinkwin isn't the most physically imposing fighter, and he was bossing Burton all over the ring, and the only rounds he lost were the ones he got dropped in because he's a bit chinny.
Sorry. I actually think Buglioni versus Burton will, whatever you say about Buglioni, he's usually in fun fights, isn't he? They're usually quite fun to watch.
I think Burton will probably stop him.
I think it will almost certainly end in a knockout, one way or the other. Do we have any strong thoughts on Yafai or on?
Has Press Pass been on?
He has actually. He didn't actually mention Yafai, weirdly enough.
Yafai's shit. I can't be arsed with him.
Yeah, I can't work out if he's as good as the hype or if he's actually being slightly underrated because he's not really fought anyone. It's one of those we won't know.
Chef, I made this point a while ago. Yafai is obviously a lot better than Charlie Edwards, but he's just as prepared for a world Edwards is. Going into Charlie Edwards' world title fight, his best win. Yafai going into his world title fight, what's his best win? Probably Jason Cunningham?
Ross the lost beat. Yeah,
and again, they've used the excuse of the division being sort of quite thin at domestic, and that's true, and that's a good excuse to an extent. But the whole point is that those division, Concepcion will be fighting for he'll be fighting for 5 figures, on the undercard, and that's at world championship level. How much would it cost for Hearn to get a couple of ex-champs over, to prepare him? I agree with you, Dewey. I think that you really can't put a price on getting a couple of proper learning fights at or around world level for a guy like Yafai, because he might step up and be fantastic and just take it to the next level, maybe, or he might be like Edwards, where it's clear he's got a lot of talent, but Edwards didn't. I actually watched that fight again through recently, a few days ago, and Edwards he just didn't know what to do.
There's a lot of ideas.
Everything he did, Casemiro had an answer for, because Casemiro had seen it before, and Edwards hadn't seen anything like that.
Cal Yafai was on Gareth Davies' pod a few weeks back talking about this, and I can't remember who he was on. He was with one of the boxing news people. It wasn't Matt Christie, it was John Dennon, that's the guy. And John Dennon said to him, are you not worried that the level you've been fighting at the last year is miles apart from what Concepcion is? And his answer was no. I fought good amateurs in the amateurs, but
Carby never beat good amateurs, though, did he? He didn't beat any top.
No, but his answer was, I fought amateurs and sparred amateurs. That he's gonna show me nothing I haven't seen before. But then you just think to yourself, that's not the attitude at all.
No, it's not. But he was never like, obviously he went to the 2008 Olympics. He got to the quarterfinals of the World Championships in 2011, and he turned pro shortly after that, after his box offs with Andrew Selby. but I can't remember like a top amateur that he beat. And they kind of took heart when he pushed Roshi Warren close. And Roshi Warren's, he's obviously good, but he's not like a Rigondo or Lomachenko amateur, is he?
No, exactly. And Warren's a guy who has had some tough fights at like I'd say fringe world level, and obviously he did lose to Payano and then get the revenge. I think Jamie McDonnell beats Rashi Warren.
Yeah,
I do as well.
Warren is a good world level fighter, but he's not some elite, magician like they're saying. I thought what was really telling about this, and we could well hear exactly the same thing in a month's time from Yafai's camp, was I saw an interview with I think the sort of camp of Charlie Edwards after the Casemiro fight, like a week or so afterwards, and they all said they were surprised how good Casemiro was.
What do you think?
And
of the world champion?
What did you? Yeah, how shit did you think he was going to be? For fuck's sake, he's a guy. He had a belt for like 3 years. What? And you just think either they are overrating themselves massively, or they are just completely dismissing the opposition. And that's a really dangerous game when you're up at world.
This comes to do with the. This is to do with like the ex-Team GB boys, their self-entitlement that we've touched on before. If they're like Luke Campbell or Anthony Joshua. Winning Olympic golds and getting to World Championships finals, I get it. But like Charlie Edwards or Kali Fai never really did anything at the top tournaments.
I'm always suspicious of these guys who say they're elite amateurs but have not been to, have not medalled at Olympics or frequently medalled at international events. It always makes me a bit suspicious. Like, well, if you're that good, why have you not got all the medals to show it, so to speak?
Also,
I know you can get robbed, but you're not going to get robbed.
It's like a British level, isn't it?
But it is. But they'll come in and obviously they'll beat all the guys at British level, and then as soon as they step up, because like we always hear this about like Paul Smith's an example though, because Paul Smith for a good amateur. I don't really know what he won. Did he win a fucking Commonwealth medal? Which is
he fought Pascal in the final in 2002, I think.
But I mean, like Commonwealth medals are.
Commonwealth is levels below the Worlds and the Olympics, isn't it? And that people throw them all in. It's a bit like saying, "Oh, I'm an English champion," as if that's on a par with being a British champion. Do you know what I mean? It's so misleading because they always say, "Oh, he's a Commonwealth medalist," and that's good, but it's nowhere near as good as being a world medalist or an Olympic medalist. It's not the same league at all. And we see a lot of guys who didn't get anywhere near medaling in the Worlds or the Olympics who say, "Yeah, he was an outstanding amateur. He won a bronze at the Commonwealth Games," and you just think. No, it's a very clever like marketing ploy that they use. And yeah, Yafai was a good amateur by all accounts, in the same way that Edwards was a good amateur. But neither of them set the world on fire, and they dine out on it a little bit too much at times, I think. And Dewey, yeah, you're right. I think there's a level of kind of entitlement that they get as a result of the setup. Obviously, Yafai's not with MGM, which is helpful. I'd be putting my life savings on Concepcion if he was training out of Marbella or whatever.
But what is it? Yafai's trained by Frankie Gavin's coaching it, Max McCracken. And he does not fill me with any sort of confidence in his ability whatsoever, like at all. Like, I don't understand if it's.
In fairness, Ainsley, the only time I've ever heard him talk was about Egerton against Gavin, and I agreed with all the instructions you could hear him giving to Gavin, but Gavin was obviously just too lazy to carry them out.
But I don't know. I've never been that impressed with Yafai. I've always but like his brother when he came through and he spots that bum in his first fight. And look at how terrifying he is, and then he's looked like average since.
Well, he still hasn't taken a shot, has he?
No.
I genuinely can't think of the last time he took a shot was probably his last amateur fight when he was dropped by Andrew Selby.
No, but what with that guy who nearly stopped him? Remember when he got injured and he come back with it?
Was that Barrington Brown or someone else?
Barrington Brown nearly done Stephen Smith.
Yes, he did. That was a fucking war, that fight. And that was that was a really weird one.
No, it was after that.
His bicep popped.
No, but it was when he come back from the injury. It might have been that actually. I'm trying to think. I don't know. I'm sure it was the fight after that. and he was getting absolutely hammered in the last couple of rounds.
Well, the point still stands, isn't it? He's not been in a real fight yet, and he's fighting for a world title. And it's not as if like they've done an Edwards and they've chucked him in early. He's had 20 professional fights.
But I mean,
and he plateaued a couple of years ago, didn't he? He's been sort of stuck at this weird level where he's just fighting. I've noticed a lot of TBAs, late opponents, and kind of fights where it's the perfect time in his career for him to be learning, but he's not learning. It's like Callum Smith now. What is Callum Smith? What has he learned in the last year? Absolutely nothing. And he's probably picked up a shitload of bad habits. And it wouldn't surprise me, although I fully expect him to knock out Blackledge, if Blackledge does well, if he does better than he did against Fielding. Do you know what I mean? Even though Callum Smith is levels above Fielding, as he proved. But Callum Smith is treading water, and as a result, I think he's losing momentum and he's picking up. He's getting complacent. He's probably cutting corners in camp because he's thinking, look, I know I can do all these guys in a round or two. He is going to be so badly prepared when he goes in against De Gale or Jack or whoever it is. Although I have to say I'm quite pleased that De Gale seems to be basically saying he's going to try and freeze Smith out because he said he wants Ramirez if he beats Jack, and people have said that he's ducking Smith. So boxing fans, again, this goes back to what Carpy was saying. People who are fans of Callum Smith rather than actually being fans of boxing are now saying they're criticising a champion for going after a unification rather than fighting a mandatory. That's genuinely what people are saying on the internet, which just shows.
And just on the case of Callum Smith, in 3 weeks, it'll be 2 years since he beat Serge Locker. There's an argument that every opponent since has been worse than Serge Locker, and that was 2 years ago.
Well, they have been worse. It's not even an argument.
It's Rabras, isn't it?
Rabras is maybe on the same level-ish, right?
I think Serge Locker's a tiny bit better than Rabras, and because I'd say Serge Locker's better than Fielding, and I don't want to triangle theory everything, but obviously Fielding squeaked past Rabras, didn't he?
Yeah. But
I thought he lost.
He did lose, but you've probably mentioned it again earlier because I'm being on, but what the fuck is this Sky article about Molina, man? This is one of the most embarrassing things I've ever seen. I don't know if you've seen it, and it's got like 5 questions in it. So like,
to be honest,
you need to like getting to know Anthony Joshua's next opponent. Like, did he fight Deontay Wilder? Yes, he emerged with great credit despite losing. That tells us a lot. Let me read some of this. It's just mental. So, like, that fight tells a lot about what Molina will bring to the table against Joshua. Next, how so? What has he got that we haven't seen before? A left hook from Molina had Wilder on wobbly legs in the 3rd round. Looking back, it's still shocking to see the unbeaten world champion so close to defeat. Molina also got up from 3 knockdowns before losing via a 9th-round stoppage. So it'll be interesting to see how Joshua deals with such a tough nut to crack.
Yeah, there you go. That's exactly it, isn't it? It's whether he can do him quicker than Wilder did. That's all they can know.
What's Molina's best win? And this is just complete fucking hype, false hype. His most recent win, he stopped Thomas Adamek in Poland. Molina was, as usual, the underdog, but earned a career best result in his sole fight outside the United States. It proved he could beat a fighter in their own backyard. What's Molina got to say for himself? I could definitely say for one thing, I will hit AJ harder than he's ever been hit. And then some other bullshit. Has Molina ever had a bad day at the office? And then it just goes on about him getting iced by Areola. Sounds like he could have given up on boxing altogether. Actually, he almost did. After losing to Areola for almost 4 years ago, he became a full-time teacher. This is a smart chap we're talking about. He pursued a master's degree in special education and got a job teaching disabled people at a public school in Texas, his home state. Wow.
So he's clever then? He's well qualified.
What is this?
Carpy's got a PhD, but he's not trying to get into the fucking ring with Joshua.
It's STD, not PhD.
Sorry, yeah, that's it. Sorry,
what the fuck? Sounds like a movie. Sure enough, Mr. Molina, or do we call him? Oh, for fuck's sake. Like, I'm going about fucking Zumbano love that he fought in.
So he's essentially, what it boils down to is Joshua is still fighting after, how many fights has he had now? 18? Something like that?
This is his 19th fight.
This will be his 19th fight, and he's still fighting guys who had full-time jobs outside boxing, basically.
That article
what
is the most pathetic thing I've ever seen in my entire life, though.
Still not fighting full-time fighters.
I've almost like desensitized to the heavyweights because that division is used and abused the rest of the sport forever and ever.
Yeah, pretty much.
And it commands so much attention from the general public that it's like disproportionate to the rest of the sport. People, for some reason, love big, heavy blokes, no matter, if they're absolute plodders. People, general sports fans, would rather watch two heavyweights than any other weight category. I can't understand it.
It's weird, isn't it? There's like a circus element to it where people just like looking at like really big people who are much larger than they are, or anyone they know.
It's not even that. If you look at cruiserweights, cruiserweights are still massive compared to like the average guy.
No, but not,
like
a cruiserweight agency wouldn't walk down the street and be like towering over everyone else. Whereas Joshua and Klitschko would look absolutely. If Joshua and Klitschko walked into your local Boots, they would look absolutely fucking huge. Which I guess, and there's an element of kind of circus fascination there.
But it's not like that in other sports. Like in rugby, everyone doesn't look at the props or the forwards and glamorize them as much as they do an outside half or winger or fullback. It's only in football. It's only in boxing that we get orgasmic about heavyweights.
And in something like NFL as well, Dewey, the guys who get the credit in NFL are like the runners and the quarterbacks. They're not the big 6'8" guys with huge bellies, pushing people, whatever, linebackers or whatever they're called. It's a weird thing because when I first got into boxing, my favourite division, and maybe this is because it's always been a strong division in the UK, I don't know, but my most interesting was always the middleweights because I thought those are sort of big enough guys where they're not sort of 5'6", like guys where I'm visibly bigger than them. They're all about 6 foot, 6'2", normal sized guys, but they are big enough to do real damage to each other. But there's still a lot of skill involved. Whereas with the small
same reason, I growing up, I always liked super middleweights. I thought they were the perfect blend of like speed, skill, and size.
The sort of guy where you look at him. If you looked at, I don't know, a guy like James DeGale in a pub, you think, okay, he can handle himself. Or Carl Froch, perfect example. If you saw Froch in a pub, you'd think, okay, that guy can clearly handle himself. But he's not like a circus strongman freak sort of body type, is he?
No.
But at the same time, when they fight, they're fast enough and skillful enough to actually have proper 12-round battles and not just 3-round. You don't get guys like Chris Arreola who, after 90 seconds, are completely out on their feet. Like guys like that don't get to the top of those divisions. Whereas in the heavyweights, they can, a guy like Molina can get right to the top of the division, despite just essentially being a fat guy who can sort of take a punch.
Molina's not like a big. Is he only like 6'2"? Is he not? He's not like what you call a massive guy.
Just an out of shape cruiserweight, like a lot of them. Yeah.
It's just like let's look, how tall is he?
Yeah.
He's 6'4". He's 6'4". That's a fair size.
I've got a dash, but I just want to make the point. Do you know earlier we said Anthony Joshua is, we don't believe he's always entitled to fight on pay-per-view. The one example I'd give is that like Carl Froch fought Andre Ward, Lucian Bute, back-to-back big fights. Lost one, won the other, and then he fought Yusuf Mack. And although that was a gimme, we almost didn't mind because he was on regular Sky. Where if Joshua had fought on regular Sky, I think people would be 1,000,000% more understanding.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I've said. It shouldn't. If they had to make this fight, don't make it for the title. Don't put it on pay-per-view. That's it. And then it's still like it's a shit fight, but it's basically a shit fight with no like if it had been Price, if they fought Price and didn't fucking bother the pay-per-view or the belt, that'd be alright, whatever. Because they've not earned. Well, AJ didn't really, but they've not earned the right to fight for that, and they shouldn't be on pay-per-view. So if you're gonna want to get these fucking stupid circus acts out, wheel them out, but don't wheel it out and fucking tell people they've got to pay extra for it.
Yeah, it's a shitty fight with a lot of salt rubbed into the wound. But for good measure, isn't it? I think, it's a good point to leave it. Thanks to everyone for tuning in. We'll be back, like I said last night, we weren't expecting this announcement, but hopefully Quigg will have, you know, a relatively decent opponent. Everyone, have a look. If you follow me on Twitter, have a look at the poll I did a week ago. I think I picked out Jason Velez, Jonathan Romero, Vet Yecker, or who was the other one? Montiel as the 4 Quigg opponents. Have a look and see if any of those get announced, because that's the sort of shite, you know, tiny shot opponent that Hearn is absolutely known.
It's going to be Vet Yecker, isn't it?
We all know.
One out. You've missed a major one out.
Davis.
No, I think that Joel Brunker is going to be the front runner.
Oh my god!
That's a fucking. That's a good shout at short notice.
Yeah.
Is he not retired though, Joel Brunker?
I wish he'd retire.
No, I think he might have. You know.
I think he's been forced to retire after he took so many souls in the British Isles.
Oh wait! He's TBA. Apparently, he had a fight TBA for Sunday. 2 p.m. start. It says.
He's so honestly, he's one of the least sort of exciting boxers that I've ever seen fight. It's just nothing exciting about him at all. No power. The most basic style I've ever seen. Zero personality. Just there are no plus points to him at all. But
who was the middleweight? There was him at featherweight, and then there was a middleweight guy, weren't there? Rich Saunders fought him, and then fucking Danny Jacobs.
Fletcher.
That's the guy.
Yeah, Jacobs got his belt from him. Yeah,
yeah. I always think of those two together. I don't know why.
Aussie boxing.
Yeah, at least we don't live in Australia. That's one silver lining.
We'd be paying $70 to watch Mundine against Green again.
Yeah, but I'd pay that. That is a super fight, though.
I'd go and watch that. Honestly, I'd actually buy tickets and go and see that.
That's hilarious. Like Mundine's about 50. His hips fucked.
Going up like
25 pounds.
Is he gone on cruiserweight?
In fact, it's 183 pounds that they're fighting at.
He's
legend. You become a legend.
He's daring to be great, mate.
Yeah, but they're both getting paid shitloads for that, you know, like mental amounts of money.
Yeah, probably almost as much as Molina. But anyway, we'll leave it there, guys. Thanks for bearing with us, and we'll stay tuned we'll do a regular show again next week, and look forward to some proper fights this week. Anyway, cheers, guys, for joining, and see you later.
Goodbye.